They called us weak, soft, a species too afraid to embrace the violence that ruled the galaxy. For 3 centuries, humanity smiled, negotiated, and turned the other cheek, while alien empires carved up worlds and enslaved entire civilizations. We built gardens while they built weapons. We offered treaties while they sharpened their claws. The Galactic Council thought they understood us. They believed our restraint was weakness, our diplomacy was cowardice, our peace was surrender. They pushed and pushed and pushed. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that humans don't have a warrior culture because we're peaceful. We're peaceful because we remember what happens when we're not. They wanted to see what humans were hiding beneath all that civilization. They got their wish, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the transparent wall of the observation deck, watching the blue-green marble of Earth rotate slowly below. Behind her, the emergency session of the Galactic Council descended into chaos. Alien voices screeched, growled, and chirped in a dozen different languages, all channeled through the translation matrix that made this circus possible. The human delegation refuses to comply with Sector Regulation 7749. The Vorkai representative slammed his forearms against his podium. His exoskeleton clicked and rattled with agitation. Their colony on Kepler 442 continues to expand beyond agreed boundaries. This is a direct violation. Sarah didn't turn around. She'd heard this song before. Different verse, same melody. The Vorkai wanted Kepler 442 for themselves. They'd wanted it for years. The fact that humans had been there first, that they'd terraformed a dead rock into something livable, didn't matter. The Vorkai saw something valuable and decided it should be theirs. Ambassador Chen, Council Arbiter Thelnos called out. The ancient crystalline's voice chimed like wind through glass. You must respond to these allegations. The council chamber stretched before her like an amphitheater, with representatives from 47 species arranged in concentric circles. Humans occupied the smallest, lowest tier. Newcomers, junior members, species that hadn't earned respect yet. 300 years, and they still treated humanity like children. The boundaries were established when Kepler 442 was uninhabitable, Sarah said calmly. We transformed that world. We made it valuable. Now you want to limit how we use it. That seems convenient. The Vorkai representative's mandibles clicked in anger. You twist words, human. The regulations are clear. The regulations were written before we arrived, Sarah countered. They were designed for species that find existing habitable worlds and fight over them, not for species that create new ones. Irrelevant! A Thalron councillor rose from the mid-tier seats. The reptilian scales rippled with colours that Sarah's translator earpiece labelled as contempt. Regulations exist for order. Humans seem incapable of understanding order. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest. The same frustration that every human diplomat had felt for 3 centuries. They came to these sessions with logic, with reason, with evidence. And they left with nothing but new restrictions, new limitations, new ways the elder species found to keep humanity in its place. We understand order perfectly, she said. What we don't understand is why order always seems to benefit everyone except us. Thelnos chimed sharply. You overstep, Ambassador. The Council operates on principles established over 10,000 years. Your species has been part of this body for barely 3 centuries. Perhaps humility would serve you better than accusation. The chamber filled with approving sounds from dozens of alien throats. Sarah's jaw clenched. Humility. Always humility. Humans were supposed to be grateful they'd been allowed to join the galactic community at all. Never mind that they'd brought innovations the Council had never seen. Never mind that human agricultural techniques had ended famines on 6 different worlds. Never mind that human medical technology had doubled life expectancies for 3 entire species. Gratitude, compliance, humility. Sarah took a breath and prepared to deliver another carefully worded response that would accomplish nothing. Before she could speak, her comm unit vibrated against her wrist. Emergency frequency. Earth command. She glanced down at the message and felt ice flood through her veins. Council, she interrupted, whatever the Thalron was saying. I need to call a recess. Absolutely not, Thalnos chimed. This matter requires immediate resolution. My homeworld is under attack, Sarah said flatly. The chamber fell silent. Explain, Thalnos demanded. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled up the data on her handheld display and transmitted it to the Council's main screen. Images flickered to life above the assembly. A human cargo ship, the merchant vessel Prosperity, drifting in space. Its hull had been torn open. Bodies floated in the debris field. The Prosperity was carrying medical supplies to Earth, Sarah said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. It was intercepted in the Sol system. Our system. Human sovereign space. The attackers destroyed it completely. 347 crew members are dead. Piracy is unfortunate but hardly unusual, a glyph representative buzzed. Why should this concern the Council? Because we know who did it. Sarah highlighted a section of the wreckage. Enhanced images showed weapon signatures, Vorkai military-grade disruptors. The same ones your Navy uses, Ambassador Kreshtar. The Vorkai representative's exoskeleton went completely still. You accuse us of this attack? I'm showing you evidence. Circumstantial. Kreshtar's voice rose to a shriek. Weapons can be stolen. Technology can be copied. This proves nothing. There's more. Sarah pulled up another file. Our Mars defense grid detected 3 Vorkai destroyers in the outer Sol system. They departed immediately after the attack. We have their drive signatures. We have their trajectory. We have everything except an explanation of why Vorkai warships were in human space. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded investigations. Others insisted on Vorkai explanations. A few, Sarah noticed, remained conspicuously silent. Thelnos chimed for order, but the sound was lost in the chaos. Finally, the Arbiter amplified their voice until it resonated through the entire chamber like a struck bell. Silence! The Council quieted. Ambassador Kreshtar, Thelnos said. What is your response to these allegations? The Vorkai took his time answering. When he spoke, his voice carried a strange undercurrent Sarah couldn't quite identify. The Vorkai hegemony operates military vessels throughout the galaxy, as is our right as a council member in good standing. If some of our ships happened to pass through human space, it was likely a navigation error. As for the destroyed cargo ship, we had nothing to do with it. Humans have many enemies. Perhaps they should look closer to home. You're lying, Sarah said. Careful, Ambassador, Thelmus warned. No. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. I'm done being careful. For 300 years, we've been careful. We've followed every regulation. We've accepted every limitation. We've bent over backward to be good members of this council. And what has it gotten us? Our ships destroyed, our people killed. And when we bring evidence to this chamber, we're told to look closer to home. The evidence is insufficient for formal accusations, a Drethani councillor said smoothly. The insectoid's translator made their voice sound almost reasonable. You cannot expect the council to act on suppositions. Then what would be sufficient? Sarah demanded. What would we need to bring you? Confessions? Video recordings? A Vorkai admiral standing here admitting they gave the order? You speak from emotion, not logic, another voice called out. Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to overturn the podium and demand they listen, really listen, for once in 3 centuries. But she didn't, because that's what humans did. They controlled themselves. They stayed calm. They followed the rules. I request a formal investigation, she said through gritted teeth, as is my right under Council Charter Article 43. Thelnos was quiet for a long moment. The crystalline being's internal lights flickered in patterns Sarah had learned to read as consideration. Finally, they chimed softly. Request denied. Sarah's heart stopped. What? Article 43 requires preliminary evidence of hostile action by a council member species. You have shown us wreckage and weapons signatures. This could be piracy. It could be rogue elements. It could be, as Ambassador Kreshtar suggested, an internal human matter. Without concrete proof of Vorkai governmental involvement, we cannot authorize an investigation. 347 humans are dead, and the council grieves with you, Thelnos said, in a tone that suggested they felt nothing at all. But we cannot allow emotions to override established procedures. If you discover additional evidence, you may petition again. Until then, this matter is closed. Some representatives looked uncomfortable. Most looked indifferent. A few, including the Thalran and several others, looked almost satisfied. They weren't going to help. They never had. They never would. Understood, Sarah said quietly. This session is concluded? It is, Thelmus confirmed, though we still must address the Kepler 442 boundary dispute. I withdraw all objections, Sarah said. Give it to the Vorkai. Give them whatever they want. That caused a ripple of surprise through the chamber. Kreshtar's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or victory. You concede? Thelmus asked. I do. Sarah gathered her things. Humanity concedes. On Kepler 442. And everything else. We're done fighting you for scraps and calling it diplomacy. She walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council erupted in discussion again. But she didn't care. Her comm unit vibrated with incoming messages from Earth Command, from the human colonies, from the network of outposts and stations scattered across human space. They all said the same thing. What are we going to do? Sarah reached her ship an hour later. The diplomatic vessel Unity hung in its docking bay like a white dart. As she crossed the gangway, her second-in-command was waiting. The council refused the investigation, Michael Torres said. It wasn't a question. They did? What now? Sarah looked back at the council station, that massive construct of metal and composite materials where 47 species pretended to work together, where humans pretended their voice mattered. Now we go home, she said. And we tell Earth Command that diplomacy is over. They'll ask what we're going to do instead. Sarah thought about the prosperity. About 347 people who'd been delivering medicine and ended up as frozen corpses in space. She thought about 3 centuries of restraint, of compromise, of being the reasonable ones while the galaxy took and took and took. We're going to stop being the nice ones, she said. The Unity detached from the station 6 hours later. Sarah sent one final message to the Galactic Council before they entered FTL. It was brief, professional, and utterly final. Humanity withdraws from active council participation. We will maintain our observer status as required by the treaty we signed 300 years ago, but we will no longer seek council approval for our actions. We will no longer petition for investigations. We will no longer accept arbitration in disputes. From this moment forward, humanity will handle its own affairs. We thank the Council for the lessons learned during our membership. We hope you never discover what those lessons were. As the Unity jumped to faster-than-light speed, Sarah allowed herself one small smile. It wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who just burned down the old world and was ready to see what rose from the ashes. Behind them, the Council station buzzed with confusion and outrage. Ambassador Kreshtar demanded explanations. Arbiter Thelnos called for emergency sessions. Representatives argued about what humanity's withdrawal meant for existing treaties. None of them understood yet. They thought this was political theatre, a tantrum from a junior species that would come crawling back within a year. They didn't know humans. Not really. They knew the careful, diplomatic mask humanity had worn for 3 centuries. They didn't know what was underneath. But they were about to find out. Admiral James Corita stood in the command center of the UNS Defiant and watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. 3 Vorkai destroyers hung in space exactly where intelligence had predicted they'd be. They'd been raiding human cargo routes for 6 months now, hitting ships and disappearing before anyone could respond. All ships report ready, Commander Lisa Park said from the tactical station. Weapons hot, drives charged. Hold position, Corita ordered. Let them make the first move. The Defiant wasn't alone. Hidden behind a debris field, running silent with all emissions locked down, were 12 more human warships, cruisers, destroyers. The newest attack corvettes fresh from the Mars shipyards, ships the Galactic Council didn't know existed because humans had stopped asking permission to build them. That was the thing about withdrawing from active council participation. Humanity no longer had to explain what it was doing. No more inspections. No more limitations on military production. No more apologizing for defending themselves. 4 months had passed since Ambassador Chen's message. 4 months of silence from Earth while the galaxy gossiped and speculated. Some council species thought humans would come back begging. Others worried about what the quiet meant. The smart ones, Corita suspected, were preparing for something they hoped would never come. Admiral, the Vorkai are moving, Park reported. They're on an intercept course with the cargo convoy. Corita watched the display. Right on schedule. The merchant ships broadcasting human identification codes were actually military vessels in disguise. The cargo they carried was marines and weapons, not medicine or food. The Vorkai had attacked human ships 23 times in the past half year. They were about to discover what happened when the prey fought back. "All ships, break silence," Kurita commanded. "Target locks on all 3 Vorkai vessels. Fire on my mark." The Defiance reactors surged to full power. Across the tactical net, 12 other ships did the same, materializing from electronic darkness like ghosts stepping into light. The Vorkai destroyers reacted immediately, their sensors screaming warnings that combat vessels had appeared out of nowhere. "They're trying to flee," Park said. "They're too late, Mark." 13 human warships fired simultaneously. Missiles streaked across space in bright contrails. Energy weapons drew lines of coherent light from ship to ship. The Vorkai destroyers managed to activate their shields and attempted evasive maneuvers, but they'd been built for raiding defenseless cargo ships, not fighting a prepared military force. The first destroyer died in seconds, its reactor breaching in a brilliant flash that briefly outshone the nearby star. The second managed to return fire, but its weapon splashed harmlessly against the Defiant's shields. Human defensive technology had improved considerably since the last time anyone had bothered checking. The third Vorkai destroyer tried something desperate. It launched all its escape pods and broadcast a surrender signal. "Cease fire," Kurita ordered. "Tactical, confirm their weapons are offline. They're dead in the water." "Good. Hail them." The communication channel crackled to life. The Vorkai captain appeared on screen, his exoskeleton cracked in several places, green blood oozing from wounds. Behind him, smoke filled the bridge. "You are prisoners of the United Human Navy," Kurita said calmly. "Power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate destruction." The Vorkai captain's mandibles clicked weakly. "The Council will hear of this. You attack Council member vessels. This is an act of war." "You destroyed 23 of our ships," Kurita replied. "You killed over 4,000 human civilians. You did this while your government denied any involvement. So let me be very clear about our position." He leaned forward. "We don't care what the Council thinks anymore. You wanted war. You have it." He cut the connection. "Marines, you're clear for boarding action. I want every piece of data from that ship, every log, every communication, every order they received. Strip it clean." The Marines launched from the assault frigates in zero-G pods, crossing the distance to the crippled Vorkai destroyer in minutes. Kurita watched them breach the hull and disappear inside. This was the part that mattered. The part that would prove to the galaxy that humans weren't bluffing. "Commander Park, send the engagement data to Earth Command with my compliments. Tell them the operation was a complete success." "Should I also transmit to the Council?" Kurita smiled. "Absolutely. Let's make sure everyone knows what happened here today." On Earth, in the sprawling complex that housed the United Human Government, President Marcus Webb watched the same data that Admiral Kurita had just collected. Around the table sat his entire cabinet, plus the heads of military intelligence and the leaders from the major colony worlds. "That makes 3 separate engagements in the past week," Defense Minister Yuki Tanaka said. She pulled up a star map showing human space. Red markers indicated where Volkai raiders had been intercepted and either destroyed or captured. "We've eliminated 12 enemy vessels with 0 losses. The Vorkai are getting the message." "What about the other species?" Webb asked. "Any reactions?" Intelligence Director Rao Singh leaned forward. "The Thalran are nervous. They've pulled their trade ships back from human borders. Same with the Drithani. As for the Council, they're in an uproar. Ambassador Chen reports that Arbiter Thelmus has demanded a meeting to discuss what they're calling human aggression." Webb laughed without humor. "Aggression. We defend our ships and suddenly we're the aggressors. Do we respond to their request?" Foreign Minister David Okafor asked. "We do," Webb said, "but not the way they expect. Get me a direct channel to the Council. Full broadcast. I want every species watching." 30 minutes later, the President of the United Human Government appeared on screens across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had interrupted their emergency session to watch. On every major world, aliens gathered to hear what humanity would say. Webb looked directly into the camera, his expression carved from stone. "I will be brief," he began. "For 300 years, humanity has followed every rule the Galactic Council established. We accepted limitations on our military. We submitted to arbitration in disputes. We asked permission before expanding. We believed that cooperation and peace were possible. We were wrong. He paused, letting that sink in. The Vorkai hegemony has spent the past year attacking human civilian vessels. They have killed thousands of our people. When we brought evidence to the Council, we were ignored. When we requested investigations, we were denied. The Council chose politics over justice, so humanity has chosen a different path. Another pause. On the Council station, representatives shifted uncomfortably. From this moment forward, any vessel that attacks human ships will be destroyed. Any species that harbors raiders or pirates targeting our people will face immediate retaliation. We will not ask for permission. We will not seek Council approval. We will protect our citizens by whatever means necessary. Webb's eyes hardened. Some of you believe humans are weak because we value peace. You mistake patience for cowardice. You confuse restraint with inability. Let me correct that misunderstanding. Humanity has fought wars that would horrify this Council. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times before we reached the stars. We learned to control those instincts, to channel that capacity for violence into something better. But make no mistake, we still remember how. He leaned closer to the camera. You pushed us. You ignored our diplomacy. You dismissed our concerns. You killed our people and called it unfortunate. Now you'll learn what happens when humans stop being nice. We didn't want this. You did. And you're going to get exactly what you asked for. The transmission ended. In the Council chamber, chaos erupted immediately. Kreshtar, the Vorkai ambassador, was shrieking demands for sanctions. The Thalron representative called for military intervention. Others argued for negotiation. A few wise species said nothing at all. Arbiter Thalnos chimed for silence but was largely ignored. Finally, the ancient crystalline's patience ended. Enough! The chamber quieted. We will form a response committee, Thalnos announced. Representatives from the Vorkai, Thalron, Drethany, and Kryn will draft a resolution addressing human violations of Council protocols. We reconvene in 3 standard days. As the session adjourned, Ambassador Sarah Chen remained in her observer seat, saying nothing. Several representatives tried to approach her with questions or demands. She ignored them all. When the last alien had filed out, she finally stood and left. Her message to President Webb was simple. They still don't understand. His reply was even simpler. They will. In the Vorkai home system, Hegemony Command was discovering exactly what Webb meant. Human long-range scouts had been mapping Vorkai military installations for months. Now that data was being put to use. 3 Vorkai shipyards, responsible for building the destroyers that raided human space, exploded simultaneously. Human stealth ships had planted charges weeks ago and detonated them remotely. The destruction was absolute. Millions of tons of metal and composite materials scattered into space. Thousands of Vorkai workers died instantly. The message that followed was delivered directly to Hegemony Central Command. You built ships to kill humans. We destroyed your ability to build more. Every installation that produces military vessels targeting our people will meet the same fate. Stop attacking us, or we will dismantle your entire navy, 1 shipyard at a time. Your choice. The Vorkai leadership called it terrorism. The Council called it an atrocity. Humanity called it a warning. Other species were taking notes. The Thalron quietly ceased all military activity near human space. The Drethani recalled their fleet to defensive positions. Smaller species that had previously viewed humans as convenient targets for exploitation suddenly became very interested in maintaining peaceful relations. But not everyone was convinced. The Kryn Collective, a powerful military alliance of 6 species, issued their own statement condemning human actions. They called for economic sanctions, military blockades, whatever it took to bring the rogue species under control. Admiral Kurita read their statement and smiled grimly. The Kryn had made the same mistake everyone else did. They saw humanity's restraint as weakness. They thought economic pressure would force humans back to the negotiating table. They were about to learn differently. The Kryn controlled 3 major trade routes that human merchants used extensively. They announced that all human vessels would be barred from these routes until humanity submitted to Council authority again. On paper, it was a bloodless way to apply pressure. Cut off trade, cripple the economy, force compliance. What the Kryn didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this exact scenario for months. Alternative routes had been mapped. New trade agreements with neutral species had been quietly negotiated. Supply chains had been diversified. When the Kryn blockade went into effect, human commerce barely noticed, but the Kryn did notice when their own economy began to collapse. Human cyber warfare specialists had infiltrated Kryn financial networks months ago. They'd planted code so deep that even the best Kryn programmers couldn't find it. When the blockade started, that code activated. Bank transfers failed. Stock markets crashed. Power grids flickered. Communication networks experienced mysterious outages. Nothing critical enough to kill anyone, but disruptive enough to cause chaos. The message was clear. If the Kryn wanted to fight an economic war, humanity was happy to oblige. The blockade lasted 3 days before the Kryn quietly rescinded it. President Webb watched the reports from his office and felt no satisfaction. This wasn't victory. This was necessity. Humanity hadn't wanted any of this. They'd tried peace for 3 centuries. The galaxy had rewarded that peace with contempt. Now the galaxy was learning what humans had known since their first wars on Earth. Peaceful species don't survive by accident. They survive because they're capable of terrible violence and choose not to use it until they have no choice. Sir? His aide appeared at the door. The Council has sent another request for negotiations. Tell them we'll attend as observers, same as always. But we're not negotiating anything. Our position hasn't changed. They won't like that. Webb turned to look at Earth through his window. That beautiful blue world that had spawned a species capable of both extraordinary kindness and terrifying brutality. They never liked us anyway, he said quietly. At least now they respect us. The Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. It had survived wars between species that predated human civilization. It had weathered economic collapses, plague outbreaks, and political upheavals that would have destroyed lesser institutions. Its authority was absolute, its decisions final, its power unquestioned. Until now. Arbiter Thelnos stood at the center of the council chamber and felt something they had never experienced in their 3,000-year lifespan. Genuine fear. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives. Every seat was filled, but the humans had sent no one. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from active participation. 6 months of chaos. The Vorkai hegemony was on the verge of economic collapse after losing half their military production capability. The Kryn collective had fractured after their failed blockade exposed internal weaknesses. 3 smaller species had withdrawn from the council entirely, citing humanity's example as inspiration. And now reports were flooding in from across the galaxy that changed everything. We must address the situation immediately, Kreshtar demanded. The Vorkai ambassador looked diminished these days. His exoskeleton was dull, his movements sluggish. His government had recalled him twice, but he'd managed to hold on to his position through political maneuvering. The humans are building something in their home system. Something massive. Our intelligence confirms this, a Thalron representative added. Their scales rippled with colors indicating deep concern. Energy signatures consistent with massive construction. Resource ships entering and leaving Sol system in unprecedented numbers. They're building a fleet unlike anything the galaxy has seen. Speculation, another voice called out. Humans have always built ships. They're a spacefaring species. Not like this, Kreshtar insisted. He activated a holographic display showing grainy images captured by Vorkai spy drones. Look at the scale. These aren't cargo vessels or defense platforms. These are warships, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. The chamber filled with worried murmurs. Delanis studied the images carefully. The Vorkai wasn't wrong. Whatever humanity was constructing in their home system represented a military buildup that violated every treaty they'd signed. Except humanity wasn't bound by those treaties anymore. They'd withdrawn. They'd stopped playing by the Council's rules. We need information, Thalnos declared. Send an official request to Earth Command for transparency regarding their military construction. Remind them that while they've withdrawn from active participation, they're still obligated to maintain peaceful relations with Council species. The message was sent within the hour. The response came back in 3 minutes. It was a video file. The Council chamber's main screen flickered to life, showing a woman in a crisp military uniform standing on what appeared to be a massive construction platform. Behind her, through transparent walls, stretched a sight that made every representative in the chamber fall silent. Ships. thousands of them. Warships of a design no one had seen before. Sleek, aggressive. Built not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose only: war. "Greetings, Galactic Council," the woman said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I am Fleet Admiral Catherine Zhang, Supreme Commander of the United Human Navy. You've asked about our construction activities. I'm happy to clarify." She gestured to the ships behind her. "What you're looking at is the first wave of our new fleet. 3,000 warships of various classes, all incorporating technology we've been developing for the past 20 years. Technology we never shared with the Council because we realized something important. You were never our allies. You were our supervisors, our jailers, but never our friends." Zhang began walking, the camera following her through the construction platform. Everywhere, massive ships hung in various stages of completion. "For 3 centuries we asked for fairness and received contempt. We asked for justice and received dismissal. We asked for protection and received nothing. So we stopped asking. We built this fleet in secret, using resources from systems you don't know we've colonized. We developed weapons using theories you told us were impossible. We created something the galaxy hasn't seen before, a human military that doesn't apologize for existing." She stopped in front of a viewing window. Beyond it, a massive capital ship hung in space like a sleeping predator. "This is the UHNS Retribution, our first Dreadnought-class vessel. It's 3 kilometers long and carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. We've built 12 more just like it. We also have 87 battleships, 200 cruisers, and over 2,000 smaller combat vessels, all crewed, all armed." "Already!" Zhang turned back to face the camera directly. "Now, I can see some of you calculating whether you could destroy this fleet, whether the combined Council forces could overwhelm us before we become operational. Let me save you the trouble of finding out the hard way. You can't. We've been at war with ourselves for most of our history. We've studied every conflict the Council has ever fought. We've analyzed every species' military doctrine. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, your tactics. We've prepared for all of it." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "But here's the thing. We don't want war. We never did. We wanted peace. We wanted cooperation. We wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves. You could have had that. You could have had humanity as genuine partners. Instead, you treated us like children who needed to be controlled. You pushed us. You ignored us. You attacked us. And now, you're afraid of us." Zhang's expression hardened. "Good. You should be, because we're done being afraid of you." The transmission ended. In the Council chamber, absolute silence reigned for nearly a full minute. Finally, a junior representative from a minor species spoke up hesitantly. "What do we do?" It was the question everyone was thinking. The Galactic Council had rules for dealing with aggressive species. They had protocols for military threats. But all those procedures assumed the Council held overwhelming force. What happened when they didn't? "We must act decisively," Kreshtar declared, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Assemble a coalition fleet. Match their numbers. Show them that Council authority still means something." "You want to start a war?" Dalmos asked quietly. "They've already started it. Look at those ships. This is a clear act of aggression." "Is it?" A new voice spoke up. The Maraha representative, an aquatic species that rarely contributed to Council discussions, rose from their support tank. "The humans have built defensive forces in their own territory. They've made no threats. They've attacked no one who didn't attack them first. Yes, they've struck back against the Vorkai, but only after Vorkai raiders killed thousands of human civilians. What law have they actually broken? They're intimidating Council members," Kreshtar sputtered. "Or they're making sure no one attacks them again," the Marathi countered. "Perhaps we should ask ourselves why humanity felt the need to build such a fleet. What does it say about us that they looked at the Galactic Council and decided they needed this level of protection?" "They're manipulating you with fear," a Drathani representative hissed. "No," Dalmos said slowly. "They're simply ensuring we can never dismiss them again." The Arbiter moved to the center of the chamber, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. The Council faces a choice. "We can attempt military action against humanity, which will likely result in catastrophic losses on both sides and destroy any chance of future cooperation. or we can acknowledge that our relationship with humanity has been flawed from the beginning and seek a new arrangement. You suggest capitulation? Kreshtar demanded. I suggest survival, Thelmos replied. The humans have shown us they're capable of defending themselves. More importantly, they've shown us they planned for this moment for years, perhaps decades. While we were dismissing their concerns, they were preparing for the day we'd become threats instead of allies. That level of foresight and patience should terrify us more than their weapons. Deep in the Vorkai home system, Hegemony Supreme Commander Gresh Karl read the intelligence reports with mounting horror. His analysts had finally decrypted some of the data recovered from captured human cyber attacks. What they found was impossible. Humans had infiltrated every major council species networks. They had backdoors into financial systems, military communications, power grids, and government databases. The infiltration had been ongoing for over 15 years. 15 years of patient, methodical preparation for a conflict they hoped would never come. How did we miss this? He asked his chief intelligence officer. They used techniques we've never encountered, the officer replied. Their artificial intelligence systems operate at levels we can't match. They've been inside our network so long they're essentially invisible. And sir, there's more. What? The financial collapse we experienced last month? The power outages? The communication disruptions? Our analysts believe the humans only activated about 3% of their capabilities. The rest remains dormant, ready to deploy if needed. Greshkal felt his exoskeleton tighten with fear. 3%? Yes, sir. They could have destroyed our entire civilization. Instead, they gave us a warning. The Supreme Commander stared at the reports for a long time. Finally, he reached a decision. Contact Earth Command. I want to speak directly with their leadership. 2 days later, Supreme Commander Greshkal did something no Vorkai leader had done in 3,000 years. He apologized. The transmission was broadcast across Vorkai space and, at Greshkal's request, to the Galactic Council as well. The proud warrior species watched their Supreme Commander bow his head to the humans they'd dismissed as weak. On behalf of the Vorkai hegemony, I acknowledge our attacks on human civilian vessels were unjustified and criminal. I accept full responsibility for these actions. The officers who ordered these raids will face prosecution under Vorkai military law. We will provide full restitution to the families of all victims. And we formally request a peace treaty with humanity, on whatever terms you deem appropriate. President Webb watched the transmission from his office. Beside him stood Admiral Zhang and several other senior officials. No one spoke until the message ended. He's serious, Admiral Zhang said finally. Our intelligence indicates he's already arrested 3 admirals and dozens of ship commanders. This isn't theater. What do you recommend? Webb asked. We accept. We make it clear that future attacks will be met with overwhelming force, but we accept the peace offer. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We just want to be left alone. Webb nodded slowly. Draft a response. Fair terms, but absolute in their enforcement. And make sure the Council sees it. Let them know this is how we'd prefer to resolve conflicts, with words instead of weapons. The human response was broadcast the next day. The terms were strict but not cruel. War reparations. Technology sharing agreements. A formal treaty recognizing human sovereignty over all systems they'd colonized. Most importantly, a mutual defense pact that would commit both species to protecting each other against external threats. It was the kind of treaty the Council should have offered humanity 300 years ago. Other species took notice. Within weeks, the Thalrin opened negotiations for their own treaty. The Marathi followed. Even the Drethani, who'd been among humanity's harshest critics, quietly sent diplomatic feelers. The Galactic Council found itself becoming increasingly irrelevant as species began dealing with humanity directly instead of going through official channels. The old order was crumbling, replaced by something new, something built on mutual respect rather than enforced hierarchy. 6 months after the fleet reveal, Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to the Council chamber for the first time since humanity's withdrawal. She didn't sit in the observer section. She stood at the center of the floor, equal to any representative there. Arbiter Thelmos regarded her with their crystalline eyes. Ambassador Chen, you requested this address? I did, Sarah said. I come bearing a message from the United Human Government. The chamber fell silent. Humanity recognizes that the Galactic Council serves important functions, coordinating trade, resolving disputes between species, maintaining communication across the galaxy. These are valuable services. However, the Council's current structure treats member species as supplicants rather than partners. This must change. She pulled up a holographic display showing a new charter document. We propose a restructuring of Council operations, equal representation for all species, regardless of age or power, transparent decision-making processes, binding arbitration based on evidence rather than politics, and most importantly, mutual defense obligations that apply to everyone, not just convenient targets. You demand we rewrite 12,000 years of tradition? Kreshtar asked, though his tone was more curious than hostile. We're offering you a chance to evolve, Sarah replied. The old council assumed that elder species deserved more power because they'd been around longer. But longevity doesn't equal wisdom. The Vorkai learned that the hard way. Others can learn it the easy way. And if we refuse? A Thalron representative asked. Sarah smiled. Then humanity continues as we have been. We maintain our own defense. We negotiate our own treaties. We build our own alliances. The council becomes irrelevant to us. Eventually, it becomes irrelevant to everyone. Your choice, Thalnos chimed softly. A sound that Sarah had learned indicated deep thought. You've changed the game, the Arbiter said finally. You've shown us that power isn't just about who has the most ships or the longest history. It's about preparation, patience, and the willingness to act when necessary. These are lessons we should have learned long ago. The ancient crystalline turned to address the full council. I propose we seriously consider Ambassador Chen's suggestions, not because we fear human military might, but because they're correct. Our system is flawed. It has been for millennia. We were simply too comfortable to acknowledge it. The humans weren't comfortable. They couldn't afford to be. And in their discomfort, they found clarity we lost long ago. The vote came 3 days later. The restructuring passed by a narrow margin. Not everyone was happy about it. Some species grumbled about humans forcing change. Others predicted chaos and collapse. But others saw opportunity, a chance to be heard, a chance to matter. The new Galactic Council held its first session 2 months later. Humanity attended, not as observers but as full participants. Sarah Chen sat in a seat equal to every other representative. When she spoke, her words carried the same weight as those from species that had been spacefaring for 10,000 years. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still disagreements, still species that resented humanity's rise to prominence. But there was also respect, hard-earned, blood-bought respect. Admiral Zhang stood on the observation deck of the UHNS Retribution and looked out at the fleet humanity had built. 3,000 warships hanging in formation, a promise and a warning to the galaxy. President Webb had asked her what she thought about the peace, whether it would last. Peace only lasts as long as the cost of war is too high, she'd told him. We've made that cost very clear. As long as we maintain this fleet, as long as we show we're willing to use it, others will think twice before pushing us. So, we stay armed forever? Webb had asked. We stay ready, Zhang had corrected. We build gardens and cities and art. We explore and trade and make friends, but we never forget what we're capable of when we have no other choice. That's how humans survive. That's how we've always survived. Now, watching her fleet patrol human space, Zhang thought about the journey that had brought them here. 300 years of patience. 6 months of action. A galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. They'd pushed too hard. They'd dismissed human diplomacy as weakness. They'd ignored human concerns as irrelevant. They'd attacked human civilians thinking there would be no consequences. They'd learned differently. And somewhere in the depths of space, on 1,000 different worlds, species that had once viewed humans as amusing primitives now watched the stars nervously. They told their children stories about the species that chose peace but never forgot war, the species that smiled and built gardens while keeping weapons hidden in the shadows, the species that, when pushed too far, showed the galaxy exactly why they'd survived every horror their homeworld had thrown at them. Humanity had abandoned peace when the galaxy gave them no choice. Now the galaxy was very, very careful to make sure humanity never felt that way again.